going back to your competitive career, out of everything that you've accomplished in your
Mm.
life so far, where does the victory, your victory of the 2007 CrossFit Games stand today?
Oh, in comparison to other things at the time, it was fairly low on the totem pole. But because of the growth of CrossFit and the culture over time, it seemingly became one of the biggest things. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, because
Is
at the
is
time it
that
was just
is that other people's perception of it or your perception of it?
uh, both. Yeah, both. Just yeah, just through reflection and growth of certain things, you only in hindsight can look back and go, wow, that was kind of big, you know. But at the time, it was like, it's like been competing for a couple of years online. This is an opportunity to get together and do it, except we're doing it in person with people. And then 2 years passed, 3 years passed. You're like, holy shit, like I guess that was kind of big. And so then I partake in being like, yeah, it is kind of big. Um, yeah. So but on that point, outside of just the recognition of the size of it, it was a great experience. I have so many positive things, and gosh, the traditional questions of if you were to do it again, would it be the same way? And there's no doubt, if I had control over that, it'd be the exact same way. Learned so many things from it. It was a lot of fun.
What was your fondest memory from a CrossFit competition or event that you were a part of besides that victory of the games in '07?
Yeah, I would have to say that I can't really pin one, but because you asked the question, I'll think about it after our call a little bit more, because I think it's a good spot to contemplate. Um, but I do remember a number of times where I was just on my own, and I was just doing it because I wanted to push myself. And those would be a collection of 1,000 times of those. Those are my fondest memories. No one knows. It's not live streamed. No one knows what I'm doing. I'm just like, I got the task and I'm focused and I'm strategizing and I'm trying to push myself beyond what my unconscious beliefs are saying, and I'm so focused that it's almost like an out of body experience when I'm doing it. Those are my fondest memories.
How much has the CrossFit idea, the philosophy in and of itself, how much has it had an impact on you and your view of fitness? Because for maybe those who don't know you and in your past, you were doing, fitness and strength and conditioning and all those things years before you found CrossFit. So in
Hmm.
the grand scheme of things, how does CrossFit play into your view of fitness and health as a whole?
Yeah. Well, the definition of it changes over time, so it's hard to pinpoint. When I say CrossFit, what I mean based upon, but it's based upon how I see it, and how I saw it. It was a great new idea on work, a new way to organize work. That's the way that I would say it upgraded my perspective on the fitness experience. Um, yeah, I would leave it at that.
You've seen the sport of CrossFit grow and change over time. Can you kind of give us from your perspective, the overview of its evolution since 2007, since the first per se competition in the sport until today, and then maybe where you see it going in the future?
Yeah. Well, man, it's to be simple on it. I think it went analog to digital very quickly. That's the way to think about speed of change. I think the just popularity of it just has been exponential in rise. Participation, it's you've got to remember it's a new sport, so if you just have 30 people competing and then after 15 years you have a million, it's kind of a big deal. So you can imagine all the things that have changed since then. It's just more popular. The we have, optimal hierarchy and separation now, which is great. Like, what being good really means is fairly clear. So we have an avatar being built, which is good. It's great for the sport. It's great for coaching. It's great for truths. you know, you're 6'5" and 245 with long arms. Like, sure, you can do some push-up assault bike workouts, but you're never going to win a competition. Well, I should say, unless you're competing against other big people at the same body weight, there's a chance, but you get my point. So it's just been unbelievable in its growth. But I mean, I'm saying that because we're 2020, right? So if you asked me that question in 2050, what's been the growth of the sport, we probably would talk about it as a different tone, and along that growth, it's which is tied in a little bit to what I see as the future of it. I am hopeful that the future of it turns into an amateur style existence. And I think there's a couple of things pointing in that direction, and why. It's been a kind of a hidden secret that no one really likes to discuss, but we've recognized over time, in order to be really good at the sport, you need to do it full time. And there's probably like an 8 to 10 year career on getting in and getting it all done, and then having babies or doing other things afterwards. And it's kind of unspoken. No one really wants to do a long-term study analysis to who stays in there and who's in there and why are they in there so long, et cetera. And why did that person leave? And why was it around that timeline? And why aren't they still trying to compete, et cetera? So with that in mind, what are these people from 18 to 28 years of age doing during the day? They're not working. They're not doing a 9 to 5. So this unspoken thing will lead to hopefully a more amateur style future for the sport, which is it's globally governed, and it moves from a private institution, from an example of what a sport should be, to a global governance, and global governance, so that it turns it into what sport should be, which is athletes competing for commercial interests that bring large audiences. I mean, that's the definition of sport, right? Where it has this fine balance between entertainment and allowing people to express themselves physically. And that I'm hopeful that that's going to look like an Olympic sport over time. And that's what I'm a part of, that I'm moving it towards that direction. And I'm also helping, just conversations outside of the Olympic sport for development, just to kind of ensure that coaches have a life, coaches have a life, the athletes have a life, by defining the sport, being honest around it, being honest around some of those unspoken topics too, of kicking the shit out of 14-year-olds and kicking the shit out of 55-year-olds, and the unspoken stuff on that in terms of health and what it means for sport, et cetera. But we're only in the initial starting points of that. So that's what I think the future would hold for the sport.
When you use the word amateur, does that go in the same direction as what I've heard Jason Kalipa say, that CrossFit is not for him, and for even maybe the best of the sports today, best in the sports today, it was an opportunity. It's an opportunity. It's not necessarily a career. Just like other professional sports, where you will maybe win enough to live a lifetime of not having to worry about your next paycheck, but in and of itself, it's not going to be, you're not going to have a 30-year career, a 40-year career. Is that in that same kind of ballpark?
Yeah, because there always enters in the it's just that, and I could be wrong on that, but you want to take a different parallel of soccer, right? So if you're a young soccer player and you're good, maybe you move through the NCAA ranks, and maybe you stop after your second year because you get a pro contract, and you're like, listen, I'm making money and I'm playing this sport, and I'll do it till I'm 32 and stuff cash in the coffers. And that's a life. That's a life observed for 12 years. And I have enough money, and then I can move on and do some other things, with the money that I saved based upon that. Right. So that's called pro, right? But remember this is that the participation in our sport, there's not enough events and the physical resources are not there on each individual person to compete 12 times a year to make enough money to last 10 years.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? So that's why I'm calling it amateur, is that there has to be organizations and systems set up to like just hand out money to these people that want to be amateur athletes as well as coaches, so that we can be entertaining for people, that they can come and watch it, and there's money made based upon that. So yeah, that's what I mean, based upon just the conversation. And I know how it can get incorrect in language, because people may see, oh, if you're making money, you're a pro. It's like, well, not really. So think about things like the US bobsleigh team, or Canadian bobsleigh team, right? It's like no one knows who's on the team. And if you actually ask them like how much money they make, it'd be embarrassing actually to talk about. No one wants to talk about it, but they're amateur athletes, right? But why are they not pro athletes? Because they don't wake up every day and just like sit back and perform bobsleigh and make all that money that allows them to live and put food on the table, right? They also play in the CFL, or they're a real estate agent or whatever, why? Because they have to have that money to support their sporting thing. This is the nut to crack in our sport. You don't have time to do a 9 to 5. You can't do that, and listen, we've tried hard enough to do that. And guess what happens? After 4 years, people just die. They're just like, listen, I'm fucking exhausted. I was in university for 4 years. Now I'm working for 3 years. I got nothing, I'm burnt out. So the talent pool will rise enough over time. You can see there's this 18 to 28-year-old who can spend 10 years going after it, making enough money, surviving, but being inside of the sport. I would hope in the future they get an opportunity for an Olympiad, right? They get to represent their country, maybe go to the Olympics, participate in the sport, and that's a pretty admirable thing in my opinion. And I think there will still be lots of opportunities for the let's call it privatized pro circuit of some of those options, right? Just so these athletes can show up and do some cool shit, make money and sign autographs and be okay. If they can recover on Monday, I'm all for that. But the current offering of that is not moving towards really cool 3-event things over a weekend. It's moving towards more and more towards bloodbaths, which means that you're gonna wear people out.
Like you said, it started, I guess, and we do have to make the distinction in CrossFit between the methodology or the philosophy and then the sport, because they are two different things. But like you said, when you competed in 07, you had so many events to compete in. I forget if it was a handful of events, and 3 events. And this year on the first day, they did those on steroids plus the events, on steroids plus some, and then they still did 3 extra days of competition after that. What's the limit going to be? What's the upper limit of volume over volume and intensity over a 4, 5, 6, 7 day period? Where is it going to stop before, like you said, maybe it's like an overcorrection at this point, because they just want to see how far we can take it, and maybe it's going to refine itself over time to something a little bit less maybe extreme, if that's the right word. How do you see that happening?
Yeah, well, it is admirable that we want to move that. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. It is admirable. We want to move human ability, whatnot. I think it'll be similar to maybe the history you'll see in 100-meter sprint, where over time, you'll reach your end stage of like wind, track surface, shoes, doping, training systems, nutrition, all that. And like we've had like a nice 50-year experience with that now, where it's like, oh, what can we do? So to your point is like, how do we make it more challenging? And I know what the counter argument to that would be, where it's like, well, CrossFit's different, it has loads and all these other things. Like, I know that, but just use this as a parallel story. Over time, we'll start recognizing that it'll reach its peak, which I think it's going to start to get to. And you're starting to see that because it's starting to weed out a whole ton of people that the people who own the system will go, maybe we should rethink the whole way as to how this is going to work, right? We're losing all these people, and now they hate us and resent us, and now they're just showing their ass online and making money, and they don't care about the weekend competition. And we're like, maybe we should do something different here. Is that the only way to make it more entertaining is to make it more sacrificial, right? Is to eventually weed down to one or two people. And I think over time that will lose its thing. To your point, do you think we'll continue to in the next 20 years get to female deadlifting 500 pounds and then taking 5 seconds and then running a mile in 4:36? I don't know. Will we get 6,000 people participating to try to break the female score of 500 deadlift in under 5-minute mile in 20 years inside the sport? I don't know. So I think it'll move more towards just trying to sacrifice more and more people, and with heavier shit, more advanced shit, more complex shit, and more exciting shit. And I think it'll lose its zest because of that push towards that. Because you're going to drop the participants, and you're going to weed out a whole ton of people who are just like, well, it's only for a select few. Whereas I think if you move it towards, and I'm biased to this, right? But what my view would be is that they are less intense and less complex, and it allows more competition cycles throughout the year. So it allows people to go back to training and get really good at those events over a weekend, and then they can recover on Monday and go back to training on Tuesday, But you see, that's not as sexy, right? It's like, yeah, but honestly, you just had a 3K row event as your first event. People are like, but that's not, we can't put that on ESPN. It's like, well, that's where you're going wrong. You're going down the route of more loads, more complexity, more sacrifice, more suffering, why? Because it's entertaining. But what you're going to end up with is I think a decreased push, admirably though, towards taking the whole, taking everyone and raising them up in terms of standards of expression.
Yeah, so some kind of your tour where you have multiple competitions and maybe almost like a championship throughout the year, as opposed to the one competition that decides all. Would that kind of be one of the, because it's true that, I was listening to Matt Fraser on a recent podcast, and he takes a month or two off CrossFit after the games, and then he literally screws his head on and trains for 10 months. And he doesn't go and see people. He just does his training. He texts his wife 10 minutes before getting home, so his meal is ready, recovery, sleep, all those things. And today, that is what it takes to be number one. And like you said, maybe over time, less and less people are going to be ready to say, okay, I'm going to make all those sacrifices to just for just that one thing. And obviously, it's not putting down the importance of the CrossFit Games, because I know how important it is to everybody in the community, and everybody's working towards this. But like you said, it is a lot of sacrifices for very few people actually getting there and getting something out of it.
Yep. That's exactly it. So we want to look at those stories. We'll use Tia as well as Matt and Rich as another example, and say, what are they doing? Why can't they be the model? And we can't stop and say, oh, they're just talented. It's like, no, what are they doing? You know what they're doing? They're doing what is principally observed in sports for 100 years, which is if you want to be really good at this, you got to take it seriously, and it's going to require a whole lot of volume, right? And instead, what we want to say is oh no, it's these other things. But you should, and I think it's a slap in the face to Matt and Tia as well to not say that. They put a lot of hard work in, but it's a lot of smart hard work, right? That allows them to express correctly at the time where they need to, right? And then they get what they deserve, and they take full responsibility for that. So I would rather us talk about them that way as opposed to treat them as unicorns. We should look at them as well, that's what we should all be doing. Sauna out on your land, and taking 2 months off after, the best pathway forward in order for you to maximally optimize. But I'm also hesitant to say that's exactly what the path is, because Sean, I know coaches and athletes today actually can't survive if they don't compete numerous times. Like they need to do it to make some money, right? So you see, this is why I believe it has to work towards amateur and has to work towards, as example, in Kentucky needs to have an organization that has all this funding, no matter where it comes from, private groups or government or whatever, is working towards 75 athletes that are their athletes. That's Kentucky's athletes, right? And they're housed and given food, and they have 3 facilities in the state where they go and train full time, and they wake up and they're not like, oh, I got to get to work on time. It's like, no, you're going to go train in an hour, to do these things,
Mm.
right? And you can see that's so hard to like comprehend, because of where we currently sit and how much the private institutions have the commercial interest wrapped around that. These athletes are mostly getting exhausted because there's no pathway or security for them. So that's why I talk about it as an amateur way.